Hi, we're the Psychic Twins.
I'm Terry.
And I'm Linda. Well, welcome to the weird, wild, and wacky world of the Psychic Twins.
Back in the 1980s, we managed and directed our own night circus for about a dozen years. And that was in New York City. We called it Pop Theatrics. And as we wrote in our memoir, Separated at Earth, the story of the Psychic Twins, we were avant-garde performance artists. We were improv comics, singer-songwriters. We were models and costume designers.
We did mime as well. I mean, we did a whole mixed bag of things with
did everything
with our fantasy troupe. It was really fun. Those days were the most creative of our lives, and we'll never forget them. For over a dozen years, we performed with our own fantasy troupe, as Terry mentioned, called Pop Theatrics. And we did hundreds of themed events all around the US and even in England, in London and England. And we traveled a bit with a British rock band as well. I made almost all of the costumes myself. I constructed and designed these costumes, many of which are actually our signature costumes from the 80s. A lot of you have been asking us to make a video about our costumes because they go around on the internet and Instagram and so on. And so this is the first time we've ever done this, shown our iconic costumes from the 80s and 90s.
Well, we never made a video for our own channel, but they've been all over Nightline and ABC.
That's true. All of our documentary films and so on. We're going to show 30 of our best original costume designs and some modeling shots from that period too. Actually, we modeled throughout our career just for fun, and sometimes people would ask us to model clothes for magazines and so on. So we've included some of those costumes in the video.
We need to be clear that these costumes were our identity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were actual characters that we performed every day for over a dozen years, you know. So they weren't Party City costumes that you just go buy somewhere and then discard or throw out. We consider them to be various aspects of our persona. They were inspired by dreams and visions that we had. As artists, we're also painters. We have degrees in painting and education, art education from Temple University, Tyler School of Art, Penn State. You know, we really have the receipts. So I just wanted to say on a side note that we did not intend to ever sell these costumes, and we never produced or marketed them for anyone else to wear but us, because again, it's our identity. So if you copy a costume, you know, that was like identity theft. We consider it that.
Well, our costumes inspired a lot of pop stars over the years, and some rock stars actually. We wore many of these costumes in New York City, Los Angeles, even in England. We did them all up and down the East Coast, especially over a dozen-year period in the 80s and early 90s. I designed new costumes for different events. They were themed events, so I designed according to the theme of the party, and also we made costumes for our troupe members that we would hire to do various gigs. We performed at corporate and private events, and we even worked at Trump Casino in Atlantic City and other casinos, at Lincoln Center in New York, the Plaza Hotel, and the White House for the Reagans. And it was all very exciting.
We were just out of art school and we were absolutely dirt poor. Like, we were practically homeless, you guys.
Yeah, it just came from this volcanic spirit.
Yeah,
we can't describe it.
Yeah, it was like we didn't have a crew of people or a house designing for us or making things. We didn't have seamstresses. We had to do everything on our own.
Yes.
And the themes ranged from everything from alien, outer space, futuristic, underwater, western, tropical themes, Renaissance
Hollywood
themes, Hollywood,
all kinds of things.
Everything, you name it, we did it. And Linda created most of the costumes that you're going to see. Absolute genius. Linda, what were your favorite costumes?
Oh gosh, my favorite ones to make were the futuristic ones.
Yeah.
the ones from other dimensions, like the Pointed Sisters, and I think those were my favorite ones to wear too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because it kind of they had sort of an avatar feeling.
Yeah.
And they were so reflective. They were made of reflective metallic fabrics and materials. Mylar and lame, gold lame. And I think those were my favorites. I loved making all of them, but it was really hard in a roach-infested apartment. I had the tiniest little apartment making most of these oversized costumes. You wouldn't believe it.
Well, wow, that's incredible that we were able to do this. Anyway, this first photograph, we did a mannequin act, a robotic mime as mannequins for a Bonwit Teller's window in Philadelphia. Now, when we first graduated from Tyler School of Art in Philly, we did robotic mime, and we ended up doing it for, over 12 years, almost every event. So we were kind of known for it. It was very slow movements, kind of like Shields and Yarnell, but much slower. We called it our mechanized mannequin act, I would say.
Or robotized mannequins.
So how did you start doing the robotized mannequin act?
Wow, that's a good question. I started in art school actually, performing as a piece of kinetic moving sculpture at an art show in Tyler School of Art, which was our art school. And I just showed up one day and I started moving mechanically in acutely precise robotic movements. And a crowd gathered and they started to they were totally silent. And I did it again in a department store called Strawbridge and Clothier. I used to work there as a retail person when I was like a teenager. I set up as a mannequin. People mistook me for a mannequin so much while I was standing there waiting for someone to come over. They were startled when I moved and I said, they want a mannequin, I'm going to give them a mannequin. And so I set up and I started to do mannequin poses and move slowly on the balls of my feet and slowly blink my eyes and move like a robot.
I remember that this was a contest that Bonwit Teller was running for students at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, and that's where we started out at the Pennsylvania Academy in Philadelphia.
As painters, yes.
So you submitted yourself, you won the contest, and you got me to go in it with you.
And I went right to your place, which was right next door.
I lived
on
next
Chestnut
door.
Street.
I lived next
Little
door.
walk-up apartment.
My husband and I, my ex-husband Mike Cockrell and I lived right next to Bonwitz, and she comes running in and I'm painting. I'm working on one of my paintings. I think I was in my bathrobe and slippers, and she was so excited. She comes in, she says, I won, and you're gonna go in Bonwit Teller's window tomorrow with me.
And she said, what? What are you talking about?
I don't know how to do this.
I said, look, I'll teach you how to do this robotic act. It won't take you long to learn. And I'm making the costumes and we're going to be in Bonwit's window tomorrow. And Terry, who was at the time, she was more isolated, kind of more of a homebody. And she always thought I was a bit crazy, to be honest.
Real crazy, yeah.
Let's
batshit crazy.
Why sugarcoat it? Anyway, I taught her the mime. She was so game for anything, and I love that about
I said, I'm in. The next day, we were in Bonwit's window, full drag.
Seven TV stations filmed it, and we were in all these newspapers, and that was the beginning of our showbiz career.
And it was also the beginning of the Mannequin Challenge.
That was actually in like 1979. So anyway, we really have done so much since then. It's like shocking to go back and
people think we're lying.
And look at all this.
But we have it all on receipts. Everything's on tape, you guys. So the next picture is the Pointed Sisters that we did. The Pointed Sisters were actually a very famous singing group back then.
The Pointer Sisters.
They were called the Pointer Sisters, but this costume we called the Pointed Sisters.
Yes.
And this is an 80s photograph by Ariel Levy, which was taken in New York for, I think it was Macy's. And Linda did an actual sketch of these, which we're going to show you first.
This is the watercolor drawing I did.
So how did this Pointed Sisters costume come about for you?
Oh wow, that's an interesting story. It's kind of weird as I look back how it all happened. It was definitely a channeled idea, a channeled design, because I was on an airplane going from New York to a Florida gig that we did down there. And I had this absolutely compelling vision suddenly of these gold avatar type characters that had angles jutting out from our shoulders and hips and metal cones extending from the helmets, these helmets on our heads. And I just saw all these angles jutting as far as they could go, but very streamlined, very haute couture kind of feeling. And I thought, where is this coming from? And I drew it for Terry, and I remember showing it to you on the airplane.
Yeah,
and
I remember
said,
that.
I just had this vision, I want to do these costumes. And so when I got home, I did this watercolor illustration. I was a fashion illustrator off and on through my, through the 70s and 80s. And I did this watercolor illustration, and then I made the costumes for a gig we were doing at the Plaza Hotel a couple weeks later, and with our troupe. And it was really crazy. I mean, I can't believe that it all came together. I lived with a puppeteer. He helped me make the cones because he worked with foam as well, and I did all the foam cutting and I had rods that stuck in the pants so they would stick out straight, and it was just really fun, I think, to wear those.
Amazing, because I remember how hard it was to get it. And I used to joke and say that Linda used to design for the Marquis de Sade in a past life because she's a sadist, and I had to wear these things.
Anything for fashion, right?
Oh, we suffered for beauty, baby.
Oh, did we?
Yeah. Oh, yes. And I could, everything that you designed was pretty painful.
Oh, not all of it.
Not all of it. But it was like, oh my God, I felt like I was in an iron corset, And we had to walk and model and dance in 6-inch heels.
And do robotic mime in these costumes too. We had floor shows. It was really cool.
So you had a dream of creating a new kind of theater. Tell me about that.
When I was a modeling instructor actually at John Robert Powers in Philadelphia before all this happened. That's where I learned about makeup and fashion modeling and so on. And I did start designing back then. I realized when I was starting to make costumes according to just ideas that came in, dreams that came in, visions, I had this obsession. It became like this obsession. It was more than a passion because this is what I did 24/7. I thought about it, I drew it, I would make it, and they magically came to life. I really feel we were working with some really powerful spirit guides.
Oh, yeah.
Because it just always happened on very little money, like $10, $20, we could make a costume. And it took on another life, like a life of its own.
Yeah, it was like, we were channeling these otherworldly characters from another dimension.
Yes.
And we performed as these characters. We weren't just modeling them. We were doing, 5-hour events, every single night. We were traveling to other states, sometimes 4 states in one weekend. So this was very difficult work, and we took it very seriously.
Yeah, I mean, Terry was like my muse. I never would have done a single costume if Terry hadn't been in my life, because she also has a really out there futuristic sensibility. It's very different from mine. Her artwork is very different from mine. Her paintings are amazing, but we both were painters, and I just felt like she inspired me. She had this amazing comic edge that was a good play off of my personality, my persona, and we incorporated that sort of the yes-no twins, the positive-negative kind of sides.
Like I would be the angry twin, and you would be the nice twin, and that was kind of like our persona.
It was.
Playing off of each other when we started doing improv comedy.
Yeah, it worked really well.
That was in the 80s as well. This next costume we call the cheetah twins or the leopard twins. Now this photo is by our old friend Tom Rush, who's still in New York.
Great
and it was styled by our friend Sissy Siska. Hey sis. And this was in New York City in the 80s. I think that this was one of our best known looks. And Sissy and Joe, her boyfriend Joe, helped us style these.
Yes,
and
he did.
The costumes, the leopard look ended up being like really big because pop stars have copied them a lot.
Well, actually, some French designers have had that very look in their pictures too.
I mean, we didn't obviously invent cheetah, but the actual pose and the styling and the look, and
it became almost iconic.
It was kind of iconic, I think.
So that was more of a look.
This was one of our favorite looks.
Oh, totally.
Now, we're known as the girls with the crystal balls. That's what we've called ourselves for years.
Pretty
and
much.
yes, our blue balls are also very popular.
Apparently.
This was a theme for us, the blue balls. Now this is a neon green ruffle costume that you designed.
Yes.
While we were in New York, photo by Julio Trujillo.
Yes.
In New York. Now, this is a sketch that you did for the neon green ruffle costume.
Yeah,
Tell me about that.
Okay, I didn't intend to make these as costumes necessarily. I would just do fashion illustrations with the designs, fashion designs
fun.
and things for fun. So this is just from a sketch pad that I had, and you can see it was the inception for what became that hot neon green unitard with the big ruffle on all the way down the sleeve. And that was actually in the early 80s we did that and posed for some photographers.
Well, Jamil Ron was the hairstylist, and he was the first one to do our hair purple. But later our hair was dyed, we dyed our hair blue and hot pink.
But it was purple on that particular day.
Yeah, that day.
And it was really fun. I really enjoyed working with them.
Yeah, I did too. They were
they provided the blue balls, but we had done that before in previous photographs. We'll show you. The blue balls theme came up a lot.
Also show you this photo of us in the sequin tube tops holding the same blue balls, the crystal balls.
They're different, but they look similar.
So we did this a lot, and
that was really the beginning when we started to perform. It was we were like 19 or 20 years old, weren't we, when we did that? And all we had was money for a cheap tube top and
like a $2 tank
and leggings, and it was that simple. And I think sometimes the best photographs are just very simple, not trying to.
A lot of our most inspired costumes started, with very inexpensive materials. We never had a lot of money. So the red beehives, these wigs were made by Cher's wig maker Barry Hendrickson, who was very, very brilliant.
The beehive.
He was so great at making wigs. And so we had Cher's wig maker. And I know it sounds crazy, but it's all true. We actually ended up doing a perfume launch for Cher
at Studio 54.
And I love these photographs, and this is our band Flying Objects with Jesse Bromberg. So the Silver Robot Twins, we've always said we're aliens and we're extraterrestrials, and this was, again, back in the 80s when we were asked to perform at Earl's Court, the International Menswear Show in London.
Oh, that was exciting.
And we flew over there, and we were the only women in the show, and we did our robotic mime act in these silver robots. We literally painted our bodies silver.
For 6 days, I think it was. Oh my God, that was hard to get off. I designed these little suits that were sort of like, they were like silver lycra spandex, just very simple, almost like a bathing suit. And we had chasing LED lights around our collars and belts and actually antenna that blinked at the top, but we didn't use those for the photographs.
It was really fun, and we were photographed by Francis Loney for magazines in London, and then these ended up being on the record album covers in Germany. Don't ask me how, but they went all over the world. These went viral before the internet existed.
We found a disco cover in LA when we said, isn't this that photograph we took with Francis Loney?
It was us on a disco album in Germany.
We never heard about it. We didn't sign any agreements not to use them, so our bad.
So the next costume, the Mermaid Queens, these are very well known now because you've seen them everywhere. This is a photo by Sue Ellen Simmons that was taken on a grant from Polaroid. I want to talk about this Polaroid camera for a second. This was at the time the biggest camera in existence, and the light was actually the biggest, photographic light that was about 5 feet across, I think. Just the light itself was above us. So these cameras were invented to photograph masterpieces in museums. And we were lucky enough to get one, I think, of 6 cameras like this.
Yeah, there were only 6 in the world.
We didn't buy it, but Sue Ellen Simmons used these cameras to photograph us.
She was an Australian.
The photographs were about 6 feet, and she gave us a couple of them. Tell me about how you designed these costumes, because I remember wearing them a lot at a lot of events.
Oh my gosh. I love the mermaids. We always felt like we were mermaids. We loved swimming, and we were always going to the beach and diving in the waves. And so we are kind of mermaids.
Yes, we're very much mermaids.
Like people. And I made the green neon mermaid costumes and conch shell headpieces that those were made out of foam with pearls and everything. We made it for an underwater Atlantis themed event at somebody's private party in Long Island. These people spent a lot of money in the 80s on parties. And we ended up wearing them a lot for different parties, and we did some cool photo shoots in them. And this is one of the first times we wore the long blue hair. And that was the beginnings of seeing blue hair in our work, and later now it's very popular.
Yeah, blue hair don't care.
That's our motto.
It's very much of a fad now. Everybody has blue hair, and back then nobody had it. These are some photographs of our band Flying Objects back in the 80s. We were singers, we've always been singers and songwriters. And when we met Jesse Bromberg, he said, let's get a band together and I'll help you learn songwriting. And so we called our band Flying Objects. I remember coming up with the name when I had a house in Brooklyn and we had a costume storage place in Williamsburg. And we were actually singers with 7 bands, most people don't realize, in New York. But this was the one that we really liked the best, called Flying Objects. Did a lot of avant-garde music and singing and songwriting.
It was
we
great
recorded.
Fun.
And
Really
we would play you the music, but unfortunately we had a problem with Jesse where legally we can't play any of that music for you. Someday, hopefully we will. But it was wonderful music.
What a great time that
Oh
was.
my God.
It was so fun.
Here's a photograph of us with Flying Objects, and here's one with 50s bathing suits. It's a photo shoot that we did, again with the Blue Balls theme and the red beehives. This next costume we called the Red Hot Lobsterettes.
Oh, I love the Red Hot Lobster.
Oh my God, they were so much fun.
So much fun.
And this photo is by Bobby Sheehan, who was a photographer who was a roommate of yours, right?
Yeah, we lived in a huge loft in Soho.
In Tribeca.
Yeah, it was like 5,000 square foot loft of 4 or 5 of us. We were mostly artists or
But
photographers.
it wasn't like a fancy condo loft like
No.
they have now. This was,
This was for artists, purely
struggling.
for starving artists.
I vaguely remember how the Red Hot Lobsterettes came about.
I think we were going to do an Alice in Wonderland theme for the American Cancer
Nice.
Society was throwing a gala in Washington, D.C., and they asked us and our troupe to design musical numbers and costumes for performers to perform in and do even singing and dance numbers through the night, and we did. They commissioned us to do that. And so we went down there with a whole troupe of performers, as we often did. We costumed them all in different Alice in Wonderland themes, and the lobster quadrille, I don't know if you remember, was in Alice in Wonderland, and the idea came to me to do Lobster Ladies, the Red Hot Lobsterettes became their name, and we actually did walk around comedy and sang songs in these costumes, seafood songs and things like that.
Oh yeah, because
Like, "I want some seafood, mama."
Well, I was Crustacea and you were Claudia,
Claudia.
or we changed that around
I don't
sometimes. But we had our whole improv act was based on these lobster characters, and we wore them for absolutely decades.
For everything, they came out in People magazine.
Yeah, here we are in People magazine in the 80s.
Yeah, and you can see Terry.
That was interesting because that was a party for all twins, and everybody at the party
That's right.
that performed were twin magicians
I
who we
forgot.
ended up dating, the Martin twins.
I forgot about that.
And so everybody performing at this Spanish tapas bar in, I guess it was Soho.
Yeah.
The mirrored corset dresses and outfits were, I think, my favorite. We started out wearing these for the Palladium AIDS benefit in New York City.
I remember that.
We ended up in Italian Vogue with these outfits, and actually I think Blondie hosted that event.
Yeah,
It was
Debbie
an
Harry.
AIDS benefit.
Debbie Harry was the host. I think we actually made these for the Stars Shine for Liberty with Bob Hope.
We'll talk about this
And we'll
later.
talk about this later, but that's where the inception was. It was for the Liberty Gala that was a fundraiser for the renovation of the Statue of Liberty.
Well, that was just amazing because we ended up at the Stars Shine for Liberty at Lincoln Center. We ended up, performing with Bob Hope and Luciano Pavarotti, the famous opera singer. And then, of course, I ended up with Bob Hope and Pavarotti in Newsweek magazine.
Oh, you should have seen the photographers around.
And I mean, just look at Bob Hope's eyes here.
I loved it. You said, "I'll always carry a torch for you, Mr. Hope," and it got in the magazine.
I did.
It was really cute.
You know, and it was pretty amazing.
It was fun.
Well, we worked with a lot of the biggest vaudeville stars, you know, Alan King and Joey Bishop and Bob Hope, and you know, I think I don't think we worked with Lucy, but we worked with, we performed for Jackie O at one event. Trump was at a lot of our events because he owned, I think, the Plaza at the time, and of course Trump Casino. We were at Bally's.
Yeah, we did parties for the George Steinbrenner.
We always worked like weekends and every holiday, so we never had a holiday. To this day, we don't celebrate too many holidays.
Yeah, it was pretty intense because we were always thinking about creating something new that nobody had ever seen before. We wanted to astonish people and baffle them and bewilder them and just, you know, make them go, "Whoa, this is something I haven't seen before." And so our silhouettes reflect that.
And everybody knows George Michael as a legendary singer, and he started out with a duo called Wham, very famous, with Andrew Ridgeley. They came over here to debut their
second album, their new hit album called Make It Big, and it was a club called Private Eyes, and we were hired to be the only performers that night, which was amazing. I didn't know how big these guys would get, but it was their American debut.
Yeah, and they just caught on in the U.S. like wildfire. They were like the Beatles when they debuted this album, and we ended up being the performers for their debut. And
we
so
changed
here's a photograph of us.
We changed costumes throughout the night and performed on pedestals and so on.
And this photograph was from the New York Post, October 30th, 1984, with Wham and Georgia Michael. Rest in peace.
Gosh, we miss those guys. They were just so amazing. We were lucky to perform with a lot of stars back then.
Oh yeah. So when we did the Alice in Wonderland theme, again, flamingos were a big part of Alice in Wonderland.
Right.
And tell us about how you designed these pink flamingo costumes, almost like puppets for us.
Yeah, that was a really fun costume to make because we were dancers and mimes. We did a lot of, you know, body-friendly costumes, unitards, and made of, you know, lycra and neon colors, and so that wasn't as hard to make. It was fun because we actually made them almost like puppets, where we were sort of like these otherworldly birds, and we made these strange sounds, and we had
like
this
alien flamingos.
Yeah, and we had the hands above our heads, like operating these flamingo heads, and we did them even at some children's parties. And so that was all part of the Alice in Wonderland theme for the Washington DC party.
Well, it's interesting because I'm not sure if this is right, and if I'm remembering this correctly, I had a year where I couldn't use my right arm because it was sort of paralyzed. I had a shoulder problem.
Yeah.
It was capsulized or whatever they call
rotator cuff.
I had a rotator cuff injury, and I couldn't move or lift or, you know, my arm at all. So she designed the costume so I didn't have to. I was this flamingo, and I would just use my left
arm
or whatever it was. And so that was kind of ingenious, I thought.
Well, you know,
working around a disability.
And we have many now. We always work around them.
So we always had that. But let's talk about our two-headed housewife character Louise, because this is truly legendary.
Yes.
How did the two-headed housewife Louise come about? Because this is now legendary, and everyone's seen us on Saturday Night Live, I think.
Well, the funny thing is, it started out as kind of a conjoined twins idea. Just, you know, we had big polka dotted t-shirts that were so big blonde wigs with bows, and we did lollipops or something. It was a themed event for children. Umbrellas, thank you. And that's how it all started, but at an event in Atlantic City or something like that. And then we gradually started to evolve the idea, and it occurred to us that it would be really cool to have it made in foam rubber, like an actual body. And we hired a friend, a fellow performance artist, to help us make this. this out of foam rubber and put a big dress on it with paisleys and so on. And then gradually it became known. That became a known character that we were requested to do at a lot of different parties.
We called her Phyllis and Harriet, the two-headed housewife. And then SNL approached us and they said, we want to write a short film for you to appear on the show. We want to base it on your two-headed housewife character. And we decided to call her Louise. Jan Oxenberg wrote this brilliant script, and she later became one of the biggest executives in Hollywood
writer.
But she wrote this brilliant script, Louise's Tidy Tips. This became a spin-off miniseries for the Hot Channel, VH1, the Hot Channel, and we ended up doing a miniseries of the two-headed housewife. So what about the white swans? Tell us about that. I remember Gloria Vanderbilt hired us to be, I guess, performers at her launch for Gloria Vanderbilt jeans, and
the swans was a logo for her, and so we decided to do identical twin white swans. We made the feather fans. You have to buy those mostly, but we didn't have money to buy. They were expensive, and so we made our own fans out of wood. They were so heavy. But I designed these feather caps and hand sewed them all on. And also we, posed for some photographs for that. It was fun.
Well, I remember we had to do like fan dances and feather dances. We're not really trained dancers. I'm not a good dancer. I'm very clumsy. And so you should have seen, that was hilarious.
It wasn't supposed to be funny, but it turned out. We didn't do it at Gloria's party. But.
Another photograph here by Julio Trujillo of our male-female act, which we did for a long time, where I was always the guy and you were always the girl.
Yeah, Terry and I started out doing male-female stuff back in the early 80s, and a lot of you have seen our photographs of this on Instagram and so on. And we really had fun doing that because it was natural. Terry and I are naturally androgynous, but she was particularly androgynous, leading toward male, and she's a little bit taller than me.
I always wanted to be a guy.
Yeah.
So I do have that male-female thing, and I remember Julio said, why don't you smoke a cigarette in this? And I'm not a smoker. I've never smoked anything. So it was just obviously posing, but it ended up being very iconic. I think this photograph is one of the most iconic. It was very Warhol.
It was very cool.
We were absolutely huge fans of Andy Warhol, and at the time that this was taken, we were kind of a little bit in the peripheral circle of Andy Warhol's factory, and we were having lunch with Hall & Oates, and we were going to be on Andy Warhol's talk show the week he died. We were in Interview magazine 5 times. Here's one where Chris Makos was Andy Warhol's best friend, and he photographed these amazing photographs for Interview.
It was really exciting. He was very inspired by. There were other twins who were being photographed by him at the time.
Chris Makos is still living and still doing photography. Shout out to Chris. These are amazing photographs. Now, the twins on top of the world was after we moved to LA. I remember we worked with the photographer Matthew Kane. Hi, Matthew. We had these orange jumpsuits and amazing wigs by Sheila on Wilshire, I think, did these amazing wigs.
Yeah, her name was Sheila. She was like a drag queen. We asked her to design and make these very, very large. I had this vision of these otherworldly priestesses from another planet that were called Myopia and Fallopia from the planet Utopia. Don't ask me where that came from.
Yeah, we came up with that.
But it was from another dimension, and we met this drag queen named Sheila who was just really great. And we said, "Can you make this huge, enormous platinum wig for us with curls and make it look sort of otherworldly?" And she said, "No problem."
And she ended up putting 3 wigs together per twin,
something like that.
And that's why it's so huge. It's like, this was before YouTube, decades before YouTube.
Yeah, and I made these sort of Grecian gowns out of lavender fabric, and originally we had scepters that we held, and we designed the backdrops ourselves and made those. And so everything was done on the cheap But we filmed that. We actually photographed these in a tiny little bedroom. It wasn't a giant.
Santa Monica.
These were never major photo shoots, you guys.
No, these were always, you know, things that we either did as trades. We rarely got paid. Sometimes we would pay photographers to photograph us, or they would trade with us.
Yeah.
Now that was amazing, though. I love that.
And this became a popular look with certain pop stars that you might remember seeing.
And all over TV too.
Yeah.
This next photograph, it's really a series of photographs taken by the amazing Joe Tamil. Now he is Oprah's photographer, and we were lucky enough to be able to hire Joe to take some of our best known photographs, and my favorites, I think, were Joe Tamil's photographs.
I love those.
We shot these at the Burning Man factory in downtown LA.
Unfortunately, we lost the studio we were supposed to film in just the night before, and we were just driving around and trying to find a place, and Burning Man Studios happened to be vacant. It was really dilapidated. It was like 95 degrees in there, and somehow we managed to get permission to film there, and that was one of our, I think, most successful shoots. Here are about 5 or 6 photographs from that day.
I love these.
It was exciting.
It was almost like, because we had this fantasy night circus back in the 80s, I felt like these photographs, more than maybe any other, captured the real essence of who we were as artists and costume designers and performers.
They did.
Actually, our Mona Lisa twins ended up on the cover of a book called Identical by John Mark Sorum, and this photograph is by John Mark Sorum.
I think it was about 2003 or 4.
when we were blondes.
When we were blondes back then.
So that was great. And then we wore them, I think, with Shane and Garrett in different collabs.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like a trademark thing that we started doing, wearing all of these kind of paintings of great masterpieces, you know, like the Mona Lisa.
It became sort of a thing, and even Crash Magazine in Paris did a photograph of us in the 99-cent store.
Now we're going to talk about some of our modeling photographs, where we ended up in various magazines and photographed by different famous photographers.
This is a photograph for a Revlon campaign. We were hired by Revlon Hair Avant-Garde. They were doing an avant-garde campaign. And we had the really, really hot neon pink hair, which nobody was doing then. And so that actually launched their campaign all over the country. I think that they did those and other pictures of us in various hair colors, even platinum. These were actually posters that were in 25,000 stores around the U.S. and hair salons, and so it was exciting to be a part of that. These are a couple of pictures of us modeling for Betsy Johnson. We were models for her just for a short time. We actually performed, remember that big loft space in Soho?
Well, we opened one of Betsy Johnson's shows, and which is really cool because we have always loved Betsy Johnson ever since we were teenagers, and we used to, you know, follow her patterns and sew her clothes from her patterns. So when she said, "I want you to open my show," it was really pretty exciting. And
it was actually, you know how I got that? I dressed up in a very flamboyant sort of kooky outfit, and I wore these really cool spike heels, and I showed up at her front door in Manhattan, and she didn't know who I was. She said, what do you want? And I said, "I want to audition for you." And I went into the robotic mannequin routine, and she said, "You are hired." I said, "I have a twin." She said, "Bring her too." And so we ended up modeling for her.
And that was in CBS Sunday Morning on television, that clip.
And this is one by Carla Burrell. She's a good friend of ours. She's a fashion designer, very talented.
In New York City, and we modeled for her, and Carla does some amazing work. Now, Alice Farley was a performer with us,
and a wonderful costume designer.
We worked with her for years, and she designed these spacey alien costumes,
and she asked us to pose in them, and so this is the result of that.
I miss having platinum hair too.
I do
that
too.
Was really fun.
This is from Taxi Magazine, modeling comme des garçons clothing, and this is Philadelphia Magazine issue from a long time ago. Before we became performance artists, we modeled for this ball suit ad in Philadelphia Magazine.
Yeah, we were pretending that Skylab was falling on us or something.
I forgot about that.
But we were in Philly Magazine a couple times. Now here are the Marilyn Monroe twins, Marilyn and Carolyn Monroe. You didn't know they were twins.
The twins.
Right? So this was by Barbara Benville.
Barbara Benville in Los Angeles.
This is a funny story actually, because I ended up impersonating Marilyn Monroe. So many people say, oh my God, you look so much like Marilyn Monroe.
For parties.
When we were blondes. I ended up doing several parties as Marilyn Monroe.
You did a great job. You sounded like her.
you.
She was so funny improvising as Marilyn. So anyway, this is a Jeep photo that we did. A photographer from Europe called Uda Kochi photographed these, and we were just hanging out, pretending we were changing a tire.
And the Diego suits, oh, I love these. Here we are in Calvin Klein pinstripe suits.
Yeah.
And we actually were photographed by Diego Campos.
Diego Campos is a dear friend now. He approached us. He said, I'm a student in New York. I'm a fan of your work. I'd love to photograph you. I'll be in LA. And so he came out and we did these amazing photographs. Terry and I put the costumes together and the clothing. We tried to make it mostly a black and white theme. This is us in Calvin Klein suits. And this is us in the relaxed dresses, kind of like a superhero pose. And so these were in Hollywood Reporter, and actually a lot of people liked these and kind of imitated these photos.
And you know, Diego's very psychic.
He's very
too. A lot of
talented.
photographers are very intuitive and psychic, and
So
Diego's
psychic.
like off the charts with his dreams, and you know, we've given readings. And he's just a wonderful person.
He really is. We love him. These are our eye designs, eye t-shirt designs. They're iconic, we say. And we've been wearing them for YouTube for a little bit over a year and a half, I guess.
Ever since we started working with Shane and doing the Illuminati videos that we've done and conspiracy videos that we've done, we started doing, you know, the eye paintings and the eye shirts and the eye pillows, and those are catching on now too.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Even the Women's March, I think, had the eye as their theme,
Their logo.
This is a blue jacket photo by Jason Christopher, and we did a series of photographs with him right after we were on the Tyra show.
We ended up donating most of our costumes to FITM, which is the Fashion Institute of Design in Los Angeles, and they, I'm sure, really enjoyed working with all of
They're
our
taking
costumes.
good care of them too.
Yeah.
So anyway, we hope you've enjoyed watching this video. It's a little bit of a window into what we went through, almost like another incarnation before we came out to LA and became known as the psychics, as the psychic twins. And so we wondered what you would think, and we think you'll like these.
Well, it was really
Please comment.
trippy. It was a real walk down memory lane, and
It was trippy to go
Oh
and
my
revisit
gosh.
all these events and experiences. It was kind of emotional, actually.
so yeah, thanks so much for watching. We
thank
sure
you.
had fun making this video. Which one is your favorite look? Hit like and subscribe,
And we'll see you in the future.